Hello! As you can see, today's tutorial will show you what you need to know when you start with Renderman and Houdini. Currently, there is a new release of Renderman with the number 23, and in my opinion, it's by far one of the best Renderman releases. And I forgot about Renderman in recent years. I've used all kinds of render tools from Octane to V-Ray to Redshift to Cycles. Since I've started with Renderman 22, I'm really attached to it. I really love it because Renderman 23 and also 22 are the Swiss knife of rendering. And this was one of the biggest reasons why I started to investigate this and why I started to learn it, because I deeply believe it's the same like Houdini, it's the future. In recent years, I was defending and also promoting GPU render technology, but I've also seen that GPU rendering is not at the point where it should be. So there are lots of sheets involved to get a GPU rendering look realistic, to be able to sell it as a photo. I myself promoted render times faster than speed of light. But yeah, render speed is not all. And I say this because Renderman is still CPU. As far as I know, Pixar will wait until the GPU render technology is able to reproduce what we call the ground truth. And as for now, in all of my tests, I can say we are not at the ground truth with GPU render technology. So it's totally okay for me that Renderman is on CPU at the moment. So today, this tutorial will basically show you some tips which helped me and which helped others to get used to use Renderman. And so I will split this tutorial into, I guess, 7 parts. At the end of the tutorial, you will see my Earth project, which I've made with Renderman. This is something that you see right here on the screen. The quality is really stunning. Everything what you see is rendered directly in Renderman. I've blurred some of the edges right here because they were too sharp, but overall it's amazing. I've never come that close to reality-like rendering of planet Earth. This is the first time, and Renderman enables me. I really like space, planet renderings, and so on. Yeah, Renderman is able to produce it. All the atmospheric effects and all stuff is rendered directly. So, yeah, let us start. So, here comes the first tip. The first tip that I will share with you is the Renderman Utility Manager. What is this? This is a tool created by Amir Ashkasari. He's built this thing in his free time mostly, or as far as I know, and he basically created a help tool for Renderman. So we know Renderman can be accessed with the console, so you can use the console for rendering with Renderman, and you can also use the console for converting textures. As you might know, the render engine, Renderman, uses their own file format for texture files, and so you have to convert all these textures prior to be able to use them in your 3D application, in that case in Houdini. This is also mostly automatic, but you can also access this with the Renderman Utility Manager. So, and the Renderman Utility Manager is quite nice because you can do several things at the same time. the first thing that you can do is you can convert PBR materials, so metal roughness materials, directly to the shader library that you can access in Renderman, in Houdini, directly with this app. And this is something that you not can do so easy inside of the Renderman texture manager, which comes with the Houdini plugin. So to demonstrate this, I will show you something like this. I have my Substance database, and in Substance we can create a material. Maybe we can create a material like, we can create something like this. So I've created a road material, and you can open the source directory, and then you can choose the files you need to use. The base color, you need the roughness, normal, metallic, and the height map. So all of them are EXR files. You can select them. You change PBR material. You can also use, of course, the UDIM. And then we create a destination folder, and I choose my Renderman asset library. And here I can create a new folder. I call it road to test, for example. And yeah, all I need to do is to hit this button. And when I hit this, the app asks me in what normal map orientation the material is created. So you can choose in Substance Designer, for example, if you export in DirectX or in the OpenGL orientation mode. So as usual, all render engines working with OpenGL, except for real-time engines. So you choose OpenGL. And then he wants to know which application you use, and I use Houdini. So I hit that button, it started to convert, and it is really fast, and it's done. So what I need to do now is to go inside my library, and here's the next road. This is my new road. It has the same name, but this is exactly the material that I was exporting. So you can re-render the preview. That's the first thing you do. And yeah, here you have it. The only thing that you need to do is to apply it to an object. So I will create basic UV texture for it. So I guess, okay, that's the one I want. Okay. And crank up the, so, and we apply the material, so we can directly add it to the object. So we select it, right click, import and assign to selected, and here it is added. So I add the spare parameters to the object, so we have it here, and we also need a camera and maybe a distant light. So and we hit the render button, and here we have it. Okay, the displacement is a bit too high, but it works. And when you activate the subdivision option right here, it will look much better. So the next thing that you need to do is to dive inside your material, which is totally pre-created with Amir's JSON file. So the converter basically creates a JSON file, and the JSON file can be read by the Renderman preset browser. And here we can go to displays and can dial that down to 0.01. And here we have it. So yeah, and it is working. All the textures are imported correctly. So this is how it works. So this is the first tip on creating textures, but you can do more with this tool. So you can also use the pairing denoiser. That's basically the cross-frame denoiser that you can access in Houdini directly. So the normal way would be to create a RIS node, like I have here, with your path tracer and with your render settings. And in order to be able to use it, you need to add the denoise node. And to make it work, you basically need to define a frame range. You need, of course, to activate the denoise function. So in that case, cross frame. And you also have to use the same time range as relative reference. So in case you've changed something here, it will be automatically changed here. And you also need to output OpenEXR files. I prefer the Pixar compression. I have the feeling that the Pixar compression is a bit better for denoising. And yeah, you have to render it out, but to get it done in Houdini, you need to start it that way. You need to hit the control option, and here you can change the range, and you need to change the order node by node. And when you do that, you need to push the render button here in order that it works. Otherwise, it will not work. So you can't start the render process here, let it finish, and then you move over and denoise it here. I've tested this quite a while, and maybe I do something wrong, I don't know, but this is not working when you do the tasks in separate ways. But with Amir's tool, you can do this. So you can dive to your sequence. So I have rendered a tiny sequence like this. Oh, I forgot I deleted all materials. So basically you can choose this, and then you use the cross-frame denoiser. It has to be the same, or it should be the same like you've used in your renders sequence. And then you select all the images that you want to denoise, the variance frames, and you basically hit this button. So when you render out the denoise variance frames, Renderman will store a lot of different AUVs inside of your render frame. So every frame can become quite large, but you only need this variance frames for the denoising process. That's the same like when you denoise with re-ray, for example. So what you also need to do in order to get the best result is to allow motion blur. Because the denoiser, especially the cross-frame denoiser, needs the motion vector, which will only be stored when you have activated this. You don't have to, but you get better results with activating the allow motion blur. So, but there's an addition. In order to use Amir's tool, you need to specify the environment variables that you need so this can work. So when you start this tool for the first time, it maybe don't run. And this is because of two reasons. The first reason in the converting process is that you will not be able to convert your textures to ASCII. So you need to define the OCUI path in your environment variable. And the second thing is, in order to be able to use the Riparian denoiser with single frame and cross frame, you need to specify the path for Renderman in your environment variable too. So on Linux is this a bit complicated, but I will show you what you need to do. This is, when you do this once, it's quite easy. You go to your root folder, to etc, and here you have a file called Environment. And you open this with root rights, type in your password, so you get a new window with more access rights. And here you have a file called Environment. And in that file, you need to specify 3 additions. So the first addition that you really need to change very carefully is the initial path variable. Here you basically need to add a double point for each new variable path. So this is the last path, then originally the brackets will come, but in our case we need a new double point and then the path to your Renderman 23 bin directory, and you close this with brackets. The next thing that we need to have is the OCUI path. So when you open this file for the first time, it will look like this, except this line, of course. And the OCUI path need to be written down like this, and then you have the brackets value to your OCUI file. You can get the OCUI configurations for ACES 1 and above on Google. I mean, fairly easy to find. So here you specify the config OCUI file. And the second path that you need to have is the pyramid tree that you need to write down exactly like this. And here you only need to specify the pro server main folder. And yeah, at the end you save it. Make sure that you have the that you know how to fix the environment file in the case you have a typo error or something like this, because when you change something, especially in the first line here, or made something wrong, maybe you forgot double point or so, your operating system desktop will not start. So be very careful. You need a double point and a bracket at the end with the path in between. And if those variables are not loaded, or if here's a typo error, nothing bad will happen. Only the first line is very important. So, and on Linux you can check this. Of course you can do this on Windows, and you have to do this on Windows too. But in Windows, you know, it's quite easy. You go into System and add a new environment variable with a drop-down menu. This is quite easy. In Linux, it's a bit harder. So after you change this file, you need to completely shut down your computer. A restart will not help, because Linux is not reloading and recreating all those runtime files in the restart mode. So you need to completely shut down your system. And after shutdown, you restart, and you can choose or can use a command which is called print environment, print env. And when you type this, you see all your environment variables which are loaded. So you have it here, and you should have also the OCUI path right here, and the prman path somewhere. Where is it? I don't see it. It's here. Rman tree is here. So all these variables are loaded. Of course, you see also other stuff that we don't need right now. So yeah, this is important because otherwise, when you start a new render, when the render process will start, okay, I need a new camera and I need to render this. So if you don't do that, you don't even get the let us choose another file, so maybe we can show this with the San Francisco file. So this is the biggest scene I've ever made, so this can take quite a while to load. So here we have it. Not so now. Over 250,000 trees instanced. And when we start to render this, okay. So when I hit this button now, you see that it will start. The scene has over 30 gigabytes of texture data. So here I have it. So now it starts. So as you can see, it is updating quite fast. I also did a pre-flight, or I copied all the textures to my scratch disk. I will show you this in another chapter. So, but currently you see, when you set up all the paths correctly, you have all the ACES profiles in here. So they will only be shown when you have done the environment variable adding, OCI adding. So here you can choose what you like. So where is Alexa? This list is too long. Linear Alexa. So for example, so here you have, okay, yeah, we have a final render. So what you also need to do is to see your render times. You can create the render scheduler, and here you can stop the render process immediately. Yeah, those are the tips for the for Amir's texture manager. I will share the link in the description, and also how you should set up your render. So here comes the second tip, or maybe the next tips. And when you try out Renderman in last time, especially on Linux, you run often in the situation that Renderman is crashing when you start the IPR render or when you stop the IPR render. It happens quite often that Renderman is crashing, and this is not really because of Renderman. I guess this is because of the structure. Most Renderman users are working on CentOS, and I work on Linux Mint. And I guess this is the problem, basically my operating system. In order to prevent Renderman from crashing, you only need to do some tiny steps. So the first thing that you do is you create a cache folder for Renderman. I created the Rman caches right here, and I created the images and the temp folder. Those are my or for the imaging tool of Renderman, my folders for the imaging tool. And in order to be able to use it, you need to change the path, because the reason for the crashes is that on Linux Mint and also on Ubuntu, Renderman cannot or has no right to write into the temp directory. The default directory where the it-tool wants to write is temp, and here has only root access and no other tools. Those are the defaults. So this can cause many crashes. To change this, you go to your installation directory. So on Linux, this is opt, and then you go to your pixel folder. There you have your license, and you go to the Renderman Pro server, and you go to lib. Okay, no, you go to etc, and here is a file called the it.ini, and you open this file. And right at the start of the entire code section, you got a section where you should define your new paths. This is working. The first 2 lines are for Windows, right here. So you can basically change this path to your new directory and also this path. Make sure that the brackets are available in the second line. And on Linux, you need to use the brackets on both paths, also on Mac. And you paste in your new directory. So one for the temp location. This is basically the path to my scratch disk. So we don't need that. To my scratch disk, where I have created this folder structure. This is the temp folder right here. And the second line is for the images or for the catalog images that Renderman wants to store. So this is basically the fix for that many crashes when the it-tool is freezing or when it is crashing, when you close it, or yeah. What you also should do when you use Renderman 23 and Houdini18, you should stop the render process every time when you change some at the shader level. So you change the shader, you stop the rendering. That's basically all you need to know, or this is the most this can cause crashes right now, but as I know, those stuff will be fixed in the upcoming patches for Renderman. So basically in January, those crashes on the shader level are also caused by Houdini, but yeah, this is basically fixed in the daily builds. But as you know, or as most users know, there's no support for daily builds for Renderman, also not for Arnold. So you should stick to the production builds, and for Houdini you stick to the 287 when you want to use Renderman. So yeah, it will be fixed in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a bit later, but yeah, this is the next tip. Currently, there is a limitation with Houdini and Renderman, and the limitation are Ngons. So each time when you use Ngons, when you have modeled something in Houdini, the render can produce arrows. To bypass those arrows, you need to predivide your mesh, and I will show you that on my helicopter, which I currently converting to Renderman. And the result has to look like this. I will start the render. And yeah, quite a bunch of textures and stuff. And so here it starts. The Renderman engine needs to read all the textures. That's why it is a bit slow at the start. And also because I have activated motion blur, and not all materials are converted yet. So that's why there are areas with bright colors. And basically it has to show like this. The motion blur at the first render is a bit slow every time. So, and now it goes better, faster. So, all the stuff is loaded, all the textures, everything is more responsive, except those areas where the textures are not loaded. I really use very high texture sets, so this is totally normal. So, and here you have it. The mesh is looking correct. But when you don't predivide those Ngons, you run into trouble. And the trouble will look like this. So, this is my model and modeling stuff. So, let us render this. And when I now start to render again, you will see, so maybe we can deactivate motion blur. Oh, okay. So, and now when you don't predivide your mesh, you get errors like this. So here's a plane sticking into the helicopter. That's basically a Ngon which is appearing from nowhere. So the fix for that is quite easy. You predivide your mesh, and this is also easy. You create a divide node. And in the divide node, you can basically use the defaults. And you create a display, or you create a null with a display section where you only highlight the blue section for displaying. And you create an output null. And on the output, you hit Control and left click on that icon, and you get a purple one, and the purple one means that only at render time this node will be executed, or this is the node which will be executed at render time, and this is only for the viewport. And in between you can predivide your entire mesh. This works also with motion blur, so there's no limitation to that. So that's the way to deal with that. And yeah, I hope to get the helicopter converted soon. And yeah, it's really stunning how nice the quality is of the motion blur. Oh man, activate this. So which will produce really nice results. So here again, it's now loading a lot faster, as you can see. And first time to pixel, I mean 5 seconds or so. And the motion blur is really, really amazing. I have also 10 subdivisions on the motion blur. So in my render engine, which I've used before, the biggest amount of substeps were 3. And 3 is not much when you have rotating objects. And this is really, really realistic. So when you compare this, let us watch from the side on this. So here you see the updates really fast. So when you compare it with real photography, I will go into my footage or folder, footage, and here you can see a lot of images that I've gathered. And I have, let us take this one. And here you can see this is really close. I mean, okay, those are standing still. I mean, look at this. This is really close to my settings. Okay, I have a different shutter, but it's basically the same. I also use realistic rotation RPM values, so this should match up to the real world. And yeah, it does. So this was the next tip. So next chapter, I want to show you now how you can boost your render experience with Renderman a lot more by using the pre-flight scene menu. In order to do that and to only use the textures, you maybe have a scratch disk, a cache drive. In my case, it is a Evo 970 Pro, and here I have not only my Renderman cache, but I also created basically a mirrored copy of my Blackhawk folder structure, and in that I created a copy, or I copied in a copy of the of the textures that I used in my scene. And yeah, all the text files and the EXR files are there. And when you do this for the first time, I recommend to create the structure prior to before you use the menu. And when you open the menu, it's quite easy. You check the job button, and then you basically define where the path is. This is the correct path to the textures or to my scene. And I hit OK, and now the menu opens. I already did that. And so you basically have, or I can show you that. So this is maybe a bit clearer when I show you that. So I first show you how you go back. You check the hip option when you want to go back, hit OK. And the only thing that you now need to do is to drag and drop the text to the hip folder. And now he asks you if I want to replace and overwrite the data. So when you don't create the structure pre-hand, Houdini will copy all files for you. So we did that and we have that, so we don't need that. And now everything's green. So I hit OK. And as you remember, the rendering is starting quite slow. So you see we have a quite low rate because the hard drive, which is a physical HDD drive, will load it. So we want to have this faster. So I switch now to the pre-flight scene, check job, check the file, path, hit OK, and drag and drop this to job. No. I will uncheck the Houdini file because I don't want a copy on the drive. This is possible, but I don't want this. So I hit OK. And now all paths are changed for my helicopter. So when I dive into one of the shader trees, you see I have now here the job variable. So, and when I now start this process again, you see, zack. Yeah, it's now so fast. And now you see the true speed of Renderman. And the next thing I want to do is to activate motion blur. Check. Oh. And here we have it. It's instantly deactivated, activated. No minute-long caching, minute-long waiting for such a tiny thing like changing or calculating the substeps. This is so nice. Imagine this will be someday working on the GPU too. This is really stunning. And yeah, this is how you use the pre-flight menu in combination to Renderman. I think this is really a handy trick to have very fast render iterations and also overall speed up in the render process. And yeah, that's the chapter for pre-flight. So before we come to the final chapter, I will show you important stuff on the render settings. You should stick with the path tracer, which comes by default. So every time when you create a new ROP node, you get a path tracer. And in the path tracer and also in the RIS node, there are several options that you need to consider and that you really need to understand. And yeah, in that chapter, I will show you what I have learned and what were my experiences. Yeah, the first thing is no render will start without a camera. So you cannot start a renderer from perspective like you would do in Mantra or maybe in Redshift. This doesn't work. You need a camera, and of course you should also have a light in your scene. And there are several different lights available. You can create a distant light, but you can also create a daylight or a mesh light or a dome light. So for showing what I mean, I will open my Star Wars scene, shot, how you call it. And here I have my, that's currently a scene I'm crafting with a heavy amount of geometry. And I will delete temporarily all that stuff. And also that stuff. So we only have left the Star Destroyer. So I will rename it to test. And here we have it. What I show you now is how you can instance lights. And you know, a Star Destroyer has a very big amount of lights. So first I need to deactivate the constraints. And I will move closer. And here we have the Star Destroyer. And the Destroyer has, like I've said, a lot of lights. And I divided that into different sections. So I have the figure lights, the hangar lights, and in that case, the small hangar lights outside, which have to be here in that area. So what I've done is I created groups for everything, for every section. So I have to look where they are. I guess. Okay, they are here. So I basically extracted the polygons and created a point cloud and brought them out via null and read them into an instance object. And in the instance object, you basically only create the object merge, or you can also create the point instances right from here. That's also possible. So we have them here. And the next thing that you need to do is to create a pixel light. And here you can use every light that you want to use. Though I found no real limitation. And you can change the intensity and all that stuff. I deactivated visible and refraction in that case. And I also added a ramp light filter. So you basically create light and drag and drop that into the light filter. And in the light filter, I change the distances, the maximum distance for the light to save a bit of render time. This is really, really handy. So when you have done that, all those lights, or this light, will be scattered on all points. And this is really amazing. So you can create thousands of lights and get a decent render, even with motion blur. So yeah, here it starts. So, and here you can see also the lights, which are very tiny, or I don't have a big amount of energy on them, but we maybe can dial this up so you can see. Yeah, I increased the amount. So I also activated the option that you can see them during render time. So basically you can also turn that off. But I like to see them. So this is how you can create instance lights fairly easily. So as I've showed in one of the previous chapters, I use a maximum sample amount of 64. This is for most resolutions and for most cases the maximum that you really need to use when you use the denoiser after your render process. So I use the denoiser, the cross-frame denoiser, after I've rendered the entire sequence with Amir's tool, which is really working nice. And like I've showed, I copy-pasted the maximum samples to the minimum samples divided by 4, and the minimum samples pasted into the extra minimum samples, also divided by 4, like I've shown in the chapter before. There's one new thing with Renderman 23 that you need to know. In the past, in the version 22, the refinement process was basically based on contrast, on image contrast. Though when your image was very dark, the sampling was not working quite well in some cases. I mean, it's up to your decision what you like. But the new option, the new variance option, is really amazing, because the image refines much faster, and also the distribution of samples in your image is much better. So you don't have anymore those areas around lights with a lot of samples, and in dark or shadow areas you have a lot of noise because of the distribution. The distribution is now very evenly. So this is really nice advantage, or a nice update. You also have the new option, the interactive refinement, which comes with different steps. So what I believe, but I'm not quite sure, is that this will refine subpixels, or start with subpixels, or maybe each third or each fourth sample, that they will be started, so though in that case. So I will demonstrate this. So I will restart the render process, and right now I will add a new light here. I will add a daylight. So, and I will change this to May. Maybe that. And maybe we can dial up the intensity a bit. 5, 10. Okay, it's very blue. And so So right now, when you turn the camera, you see that the update process looks differently. So when you turn off interactive refinement, the updates are starting in the middle of the screen. Okay, let us deactivate this for a while. And when you activate this, you get a more responsive way of updating. So the updating process is a bit better. But you also have those shadows, those rendering shadows. But this is also only for the refinement in the IPR. This is really nice for changing lights and so on. So maybe we can change the exposure, and so the interactivity is much better when you activate the interactive refinement. So, and also not only this is changed, also the pixel variance was changed. So in the past, the default value was quite low, somewhere around this, or I guess, or this. And you also had a limit darkness value, or some sort of it. And with the new adaptive metric, you have much more reasonable values like in Mantra, and the default value is that basically. So you can dial it up in Redshift and also in Mantra. I often use the default value, which is in Mantra 0.05, which is totally enough on a 6K ARRI comparable image, or a 4K. 0.05 is totally enough. And as your image size decreases, you should also decrease this value. So when you work with very tiny images, you should move this value down. And when your image size becomes increased, you can dial it up. So 0.015 is the defaults are really nice, and they are working in most cases. But they also have influence on how far away each pixel is placed in the important sample mode. So this has a direct impact on your denoise result. So when you use the denoiser, use the defaults or lesser. But you have to choose what you want to have: more speed or more quality to the pixel level. When you only want to render a preview daily or something like this, you can dial those values up and you have really fast renders. But of course, lesser quality also in the denoising. So with that being said, you have also in the render tab a limit section where you can change the limits of the renderer itself. You can specify how many threads the render process should use. 0 means all cores, and of course 1 means only one thread. And when you do heavy changes in lighting and so on, I recommend to use 1 thread left of your maximum thread amount. So I have 8 threads. I would only use 7. So I have a very responsive Houdini as a backend for all my changes, and also in heavy scenes. But you also can dial up the amount of memory cache. So this is all in bytes, when I remember correctly. You can change the bucket size. You can change the grid size. You shouldn't do that, only if you understand what this is. And to learn a bit more into the entire render process, into everything in regard to Renderman and also in combination to Houdini, I recommend that you visit the Renderman Pixar website. So here you have a really big amount of documentation. So, and you also have the forums. So when you have a commercial license, you have access to the direct forum. So all commercial license owners have this access, and all non-commercial license owners can post their problems into answers. What I really like is that Pixar is really, like side effects. They are reacting to your posts almost on the same day, and this is really awesome. I've never seen that before on a render engine. This is one of the reasons why I like it very much. So the support is really nice, and here you can post all kinds of stuff. Currently there are some postings, and you see they are viewed and they are also posted and updated. So, but you also can go to the learning section, and here you have resources, tutorial, and the most important button is docs. And on docs you get the entire documentation. So Renderman, the renderer itself, but you get also the install documentation, what you need to know on the install process, how you install it with a license or with the non-commercial. And you also have here right on top the documentation for each DCC application. So in that case, Houdini. So there are a really big amount of really nice stuff that you need to know. And every time when you have a question, when you have a problem, you should first look into that documentary, because it really helps. It really helps to understand everything. There are also stuff that you really need to know when you use Houdini. So some of the attributes in your properties are working directly with Renderman. So in that case, the geometry velocity blur. There is no additional section right here. You can simply use the option which comes by default with Houdini. So they are connected. It's also important to know that every time when you change a scene or when you update a scene in Houdini, not only in Renderman but also in other render applications or for other render applications, you should revert to the defaults. So revert to factory defaults each time you update your Houdini version. So in that case, I don't did that prior when I started with Houdini18 and Renderman 23, and I had really a big amount of crashes. So to avoid those crashes, you really need to do this basically. And all the stuff will rearranged. Of course, you should back up your expressions in case you have used some of them. And in most cases, you also don't have any more problems with the spare parameters that you can add with the shelf buttons. Also for the other render engines and so on. So keep that in mind. When you change the version, change also the entire object parameter defaults. So back to my defaults. I already did this. And there's also another source that you really should visit when you use Renderman, and this is the Renderman or the Pixar's Renderman Discord. This is, as for now, in my opinion, the best community platform for Renderman. It's accessible, Discord is accessible on your browser, but also as a standalone app. And you can download it for free, you can install it. You only need to make an account, you need to register that account, and then you can access this Pixar Renderman Discord with the link I will provide in the description. And here you have a lot of sections. This is basically really advanced. You can post stuff, documentation, guides, and you can talk to other people. I mean, we also have a Hangout channel where you can directly speak to other people. And yeah, we exchange our discoveries, our experiences, and we can also show our progress. We have a whip feedback section where I post also my stuff. And we have a help section where you can post your problems. And the nice advantage of this Discord is also that there are people directly from Pixar, the Pixar staff, which helps you. So yeah, when you really have a problem that you not be able to resolve for yourself or with the community, you can directly ask them and they really help you. So you learn a lot from them. And yeah, sometimes we also do some fun, so when you be frustrated. And yeah, this is really an awesome community. So I will provide the link and I hope you will join it. It's for free and it really helps you. And of course, you can also go on the official Renderman groups on Facebook and share your stuff there. But you get on Discord the fastest response and also very, very fast feedback. Sometimes you receive information that you really don't get so fast on Facebook. So this is firsthand. So you should really use it. So another chapter. This chapter is quite short, and this is about USD files. And I personally don't use the Lops context right now. Also in regards to Renderman's updates, it makes sense to look at Lops in January when Renderman is also updated to Renderman 23.1. So I believe it will be better to use Lops then. But of course you can check it out right now. But sometimes you want to use USD files in your workflow because those files can be or will be loaded very, very, very fast. And when you, for example, take one of those USD files, which Side Effects has provided, you have the problem that when you're new to the USD, you don't know what to do. So you have the USD import. So basically when you type USD, you get the USD import and change the name and you don't know where is the object. The only thing that you need to do is type a slash. And here you have it. The problem is this is still a USD file and a packed primitive on top, and you cannot render this outside of Lops on that way. For this workflow, you need to convert the file. And there are two ways. The one way is to unpack them to polygons, would be able to render. And here you can also check, maybe you have another resolution, you can check the render stuff. The better way would be to use the predefined USD to polygons convert node, unpack node, because here you get the UV coordinates, rest coordinates, and all the attributes from the USD file itself, and those files can be rendered. So when I hit now, here you have it, and without, you shouldn't, what's going on? My bad. So this is without, and this is with the converted one. And the nice thing is, even when you're not inside of Lops, it's really, really fast. I mean, this is crazy. So yeah, that's it. This is how you can use USD files. Of course, you can also export USD files from here with all the stuff that you want. So here we come to the final chapter. I will present you my Earth project. So I need to load this, which is right here. And when you open this project for the first time, you will see nothing but this black sphere. And this is because what you see right now are the volumes. So I have tried to make a good documentation. I hope I covered all the needed stuff that you need to know. And when you watch the scene from outside, you see that I already have turned the Earth into the correct angle to the Sun. So in that case, minus 23.5 degrees for the months of June and July on the northern hemisphere. So that's why this handle is turned by that number. And so basically the origin axis is the correct axis to the Sun. So the Sun has to be on that axis. And the next thing that you see is I have different objects. I have the Earth geometry. I have the atmosphere, which is basically a volume. I have the ionosphere, which is also a volume on top, basically the same like the atmosphere, but with a different shader, and also the cloud geometry. And I will show you how each looks. So I will deactivate them all except the Earth, and we'll start a render, and we'll dial down the render size for demonstration. So 1/4 should be enough. And for the final image, like I've said, I've deactivated the incremental render, and I've also decreased the pixel variance a bit lesser, and dialed up the maximum sample amount. So right now I have it on 128. When you want to render animation and you will use the denoiser, you can dial this down to, let us say, 64 or even lower. I've tested 48, and this is also working quite nice. So of course this depends also on resolution. So I will dial this down to 64 now, and we'll start a render. I have rendered the entire scene in square because I add the surrounding space in compositing, so you don't get the stars, you only get the planet itself, and here you see it starts. And what you see is I have basically used the shader to determine where should the night texture be visible, the emission texture for the night visible, and on which places there should be no night lights. You also see that the ocean doesn't look blue. this is because the blue shading of the ocean comes mostly by our atmosphere, and I tried to mimic this. So this entire scene is not, I will not say physically correct from the termination of a simulation, because this Renderman, or there is only a few amount of render engines that are really able to render real light or spectral rendering. I worked on that for almost 4 months, I guess, from time to time. And yeah, this is basically the result. So I also have added the cloud layer, which is basically a texture, a displaced texture. And I also use subsurface scattering and a lot of tweaks, also some tiny cheats to get a decent result. So in the transition area, the clouds have to tint it a bit in orange and red. This is caused in the real world by the angle of light in the atmosphere. So, and I will show you now how this shader looks, and this is really, really big. And yeah, the first thing that you see, this is a geometry object. So we not only load the texture here and correct it here, we use the pixel facing ratio and the angle from our pixel distant light. So I basically used the angle of the pixel distant light with a calculation Euler function. So you create the vector, or the rotation will be converted to the vector, and this value will be used directly in the shader right here for the correct direction. So each time you turn this will be updated. And this is really important because I basically reuse the facing ratio to mask out where are the areas where the sun hits the surface and where are the shadow areas. And this will be used to blend between day and night time. And for this, I have created a very big amount of different ramps. So I basically use this as a ramp. And I also used expressions, basic expressions, to change those values for subsurface scattering, gain. And I also, I documented each step, or the most important ones that you can change, of course. So this is the ramp for the coloring in the diffuse color. I have similar ramps for the subsurface scattering, and also for the parts where the sun directly hits the surface. So they have to turn blue. And I've also added a transparency, or overall transparency fake. The presence value is basically the opacity without refractions. I used the expression to dial this down a bit. This helps a lot to blend between the geometry texture and the atmosphere. So this is really important and was one of the key reasons why this looks more realistic now. So it basically is a 80% average onto the pixel behind. So yeah, I have also used the pixel bump values and the displacements for the clouds to look more real, to have some type of density not just a flat texture. And I use the luminance value to basically be able to extrude them into the height with the displacement map. And this looks really, really good. So on the Earth, it's basically the same. I have used the facing ratio, and yeah, I used also here quite a lot of facing ratios to be able to render day and night. And as you can see, this is here. So I have used the same facing ratio function with the sunlight direction and a ramp value, which is quite tiny, into the glow gain value, and I added the earth night texture to the glow color. And on the specular roughness, I blended between a default roughness and the specular map, which I provide. And basically here I blended additional colors into that. I also blended in the ocean color ramp. So here's another facing ratio with the camera angle. So each time you turn the camera, the facing ratio will be change or adapt to your camera view. And here I have basically a facing ratio decay between the center point of the sphere and the outer point of the sphere. So, or the highest angle, and so there's a ramp for that. This helps also to blend between the atmosphere and to fake a kind of depth to the oceans. So, but I documented most of the stuff. On the Earth, I don't use the pixel bump because I am quite far away from Earth. So when you move closer to the Earth, you should activate the bump function. You should connect it to here. A tiny effect for the waves. So I've added a fractal to mimic tiny bumps on the ocean so that the specular is not so flat. So, but on that distance you don't really need that. So, and now we move over to the atmosphere shader, but this was really tricky. And I used a big amount of cheats on that, and with that being said, I really dive into that, and here I basically tried somehow to create also ramps for the transition area between day and night, and this was really, really hard because you need to do this, otherwise it can happen that your light will scatter through the volume into the shadow areas of the planet, and this is not real. So at the transition area, all the light, all the illumination in the volume has to stop, and this is all only possible with this. So what I basically did is I used the pixel manifold, which will output a X, Y, and Z value, basically the X, Y, and Z direction in the volume based on the object rotation. And to be able to make this work, you have to rotate the object. Or the atmosphere object based on your sun light direction. So I use the rotation values of the atmosphere, and each time the sun angle will change, basically the entire atmosphere will rotate, but you don't see this. So that's a cheat basically. And the volume itself is not that dense. Only 100 subdivisions, but this doesn't matter, because with this ramp technique you'll be able to shape the overall resolution. So I basically used ramps to select or to mask out where are the areas where we need the atmosphere, right here, and where are the areas where we don't need the atmosphere, which also helps on render time. So here this is basically the mask. I can also call this mask, and I use the expression to make the atmosphere thicker. And okay, here's a typo error. How thick Earth atmosphere really is. And this will be feeded into the density color. I've also changed I use multi-scattering. You can deactivate this. Because I guess in the animation you don't see a difference, especially when your camera is moving fast. But when you want to have the maximum quality, also that the edge of the atmosphere is basically glowing, you need to activate this. This is really important to have a correct atmosphere edge on the planet. I also changed some stuff here to get a better render result or a faster render result. And I use the density volume basically to shape this. So, but in the end, I used the same method also for other ramps. So I basically used the Z ramp or the Z angle towards the sun to create another ramp. In that case, the ramp for tinting. So basically, on the left side where the sun hits first, the color will be mostly white. And as far as I go into the shadow area, it will be tinted to some type of skin color or orange. And I used those methods quite a lot. And here I use the phasing ratio effect basically. The advantage on this method is that this is a sphere, and because of that I can use this way to create a phasing ratio on a volume. And here I use it to tint the close to Earth and the outer hulls of our atmosphere, so on Earth and in space. So this was really handy with that tiny cheat here. And I feeded it into different color corrections, and on the same way I created also the ionosphere. And the ionosphere was a bit difficult because the ionosphere is basically only a shell or you can only see the ionosphere really on the shell or on the outside of the atmosphere, on top of the atmosphere. So I used basically the same shader, but I have changed this shader quite a lot. So here's what we had, and I used a very tiny amount of ramp, so basically only that section on the phasing ratio angle, and the thickness is basically the same. And I also used the manifold nodes to create noises. I blended various noises to mask out areas, so I hope it will not crash now. And it should not crash, but you can see it right here. So I use different noises to be able to mask out areas which I don't like. So this was the wrong button. I deactivate this pixel readout. And I also have what I did. So, okay, stop. Once more. And I also used different fractals to tint the atmosphere or the ionosphere. The ionosphere is also masked in the areas between the poles and 2/3 of the middle area. So only on this areas you can see the ionosphere. So basically the northern lights. They are not 100% correct, as you can see. There you don't see any banding or those northern light bands. You only see some noises, but yeah, you can tweak this. In most images I have seen from NASA, there you cannot see them that much. So, but I've added this because the latest recordings of NASA have shown the ionosphere, and the ionosphere is also very bright on the pole or in the pole areas, and they are really colorful. So yeah, this is my version of them, not physical correct. But as it will look real, it's totally okay. So this is basically what I did. And I will distribute this entire file with a basic resolution, so I guess 12K for the maps, for everyone for free. And the 40K variants or 43K variants will be available in a second Gumroad link with a tiny amount that you need to pay to get them. I think it's okay because I really invested a lot of time to get a real rendering. And this is also the first time that I was so close to real photography. So I believe this is one of the reasons why most Oscar-nominated VFX and modern cinema are rendered with Renderman. I think the options that you have and the amount of support and also how stable in most cases Renderman is compared to other render engines, this is really a Swiss knife. So I recommend to use it really, and I hope that there will be more people starting to use it, also because XPU will provide a change in the future. I really deep believe that XPU will change how we make images. I see that a lot of people are using real-time engines in the past for creating stages or stage lighting. But I really believe when it comes to geometry mounts, I mean hundreds of millions of polygons and very, very sophisticated shading, there is no way around Renderman in the future. Renderman XPU on a very good computer with maybe 64 cores and 2 RTX cards will be a game changer in the industry. And I guess, and I believe a lot of people see it. That's why there's a big amount of interest into Renderman these days. Again, after a very long period where Renderman, or when nobody was talking about Renderman in the freelance community. So I believe that those times have changed, and I will provide the download link for this file in the description of the video. And I will also provide the direct link to the Gumroad link where you can buy the high-res version of it. And I believe you will really learn from it, and you will really have a lot of fun with it, because the results are really amazing. And to give you another tip, when you want to use some of those images in an animation, you can render a really big image in Houdini. So like I've done a 4096 pixel a quarter image of this, and you can map it in Fusion or in Nuke onto a sphere, and you can use it in the animation even when the camera is rotating with a good camera mapping. So the results are really amazing. I mean, when you look at this, you see where the sun is fading out in the atmosphere, but also that you can tint the atmosphere based on the angle is really nice. It's really awesome. And you see it's also updating very fast. Okay, it's a very low resolution, but we can maybe change this to the full resolution. And when you first start the full resolution, it can happen that the render will start after 1 minute or 2 minutes. This is depending on your CPU, because I have a very dense amount of displacement. So the displacement in Renderman is based on pixel width, or basically on the size of the pixels. You can change this, the micropolygon length. Here is it. This is basically based on pixels. So you can dial this up and you get faster renderings, but of course lesser resolution in the displacement. For animation this makes sense, but in most cases you don't need to change that, because this happens automatically based on your resolution. The 43K maps are really stunning. So this is amazing. All these details here. So that's it. I hope you learned something from this, and I hope you start with Renderman. And if you have a question, come into our Discord and leave a question there, and I believe we will help you, and also the Pixar employees will help you. So this can be really big fun. So I also wish every one of you a very nice Christmas Eve and a very nice transition into the new year. And then we have a lot of new toys, like the update of Renderman and also updates for Houdini. Last week the limitation for the indie users is lifted, so you can now export also the USD files, the full USD files, and this is really a really nice Christmas present. And this looks really quite nice. So have a nice day.